the public react. It's not just Democrats, it's swing voters as well. I mean, $100 million in donations, 1.1 million unique donors, 62% are first-time donors. The public react. It's not just Democrats, it's swing voters as well. I mean, $100 million in donations, 1.1 million unique donors, 62% are first-time donors.
During the most recent episode of The Five, liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov was able to spread the abundant good news since Vice President Kamala Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee, and she was able to do it to the faces of her 4 Kamala Harris-hating co-hosts, and it was glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to look at in this video. As you know, we make no bones about it. We are unapologetic. We are the unofficial Jessica Tarlov fan club. I believe she has the hardest job in mainstream media as the lone voice of sanity on the Fox propaganda network. She has to go to work every day, walk into the lion's den, the belly of the beast, and she is surrounded by 4 unambiguous Trump-supporting, Kamala Harris-hating co-host, people who act in bad faith and engage in all kinds of dishonesty, who heckle and interrupt her. She's on the back foot, except when it comes to facts. And so because of extraordinary talent, she's able to acquit herself remarkably well, despite the odds being against her. And with that in mind, this is the most recent episode of The Five, one of the biggest shows on the Fox propaganda network, in the aftermath of President Biden's decision not to seek re-election and his decision to formally endorse Vice President Harris to be the presumptive Democratic nominee. And there's been a lot of good news since then. So we're going to play this clip and unpack it together.
I think that when you talk about the coup, I should have used my quotes, the coup of all of this, the fact of the matter is that no rules were violated from this. The DNC rules are the same that they were 2 weeks ago as they are today that allowed this. And these delegates pledged to support Joe Biden, who then told Joe Biden what he wanted. And what he wanted was for them to support Kamala Harris. I know a lot of people, I know Harold, for instance, was in support of a mini primary of some kinds, and everyone was trying to game out, you could have battleground town halls, for instance, let delegates vote. We have no time. And we also have a record of the Biden-Harris administration that a lot of people are really proud of. And she is the heir to that record. And the Trump team, they will try to run against that. But she's come armed, not with a knife, but with the kind of guns that she needs to talk about what's gone on with the economy, to talk about what they've done in terms of producing more oil than ever in history, what they're doing to expand Medicaid, capping insulin $35, et cetera. And you're seeing the public react. It's not just Democrats, it's swing voters as well. I mean, $100 million in donations, 1.1 million unique donors, 62% are first-time donors. A lot of the big donors, except for one, I think, notably, but are back in. Reed Hastings just gave $7 million. He was one of the first ones to call on Biden to drop out. Should also say that Trump's path to winning was running through getting many more Gen Z voters and many more black voters. The CBS numbers of Gen Z 62 to 37, Kamala advantage, and there were organizing calls for black women and black men. Over 40,000 people were on each of those calls.
Got it.
We're alive.
Okay, so Kate.
Damn. That's a lot of good news. Again, as I've said before, I mean, the race is still competitive. This is still going to be a very close election based on the indicators. But there has been a sweep of good news ever since this decision by President Biden and Vice President Harris's decision to accept his endorsement and become the Democratic frontrunner. I mean, she rattled them off. We've talked about them in previous videos. It's staggering, okay? And you see it in terms of how MAGA Republicans are panicking and the disparate, uncoordinated, chaotic message. They don't really have an effective one against the vice president. Perhaps they will. They're very good propagandists. It's entirely possible. But it's so good that Jessica Tarlov is there and able to present these facts, these uncomfortable facts, to not only 4 hostile co-hosts, but also to an audience that might not otherwise hear it. I mean, the 24-hour fundraising record of Vice President Harris, it just shattered, right? Previous efforts by President Biden, but also Donald Trump as well. And he has a cult, tens of millions strong. He has, billionaires, some of the richest people on earth, Peter Thiel, David Sachs, Elon Musk, who have pledged their considerable financial support. And despite all of these things, $100 million raised in a 24-hour period, 888,000 new donors, or rather small grassroots donors, and 60% of them new first-time donors. That is staggering. And that's just in the first 24 freaking hours. There's a lot of potential here that the Democrats should seek to maximize any which way they possibly can. The initial polling, I mean, again, you think about how Vice President Harris, she doesn't have the name recognition of the president, and certainly not even Donald Trump. And she was seen kind of, as the next figure in line. The focus has been on Biden. So is it true that the vice president is not currently particularly popular? Yes, that's true. But also consider the fact that Donald Trump, despite the enormous political advantages at his disposal, the fact that Joe Biden is the sitting president, so many elections are referendums on the sitting president, the fact that nostalgia and people's warped sense of time has played to his advantage, the fact that he has the full might of right-wing media and the Republican Party and big billionaire money behind him, the fact that people are the mainstream media, even, my God, even though their reporters will undoubtedly vote against Trump, it's a favorable media ecosystem for Trump himself. And he just had an assassination attempt on him. And despite all of that, my friends, he is now at the highest approval rating he's had in 4 years, and it's only 40%. Donald Trump has an approval rating, despite all of those advantages, of 40%. He is even now extraordinarily disliked. There is enormous potential for the vice president to lap him in terms of likability, as long as she gets out there. And there's 3.5 months to do it. While President Biden is governing the country, Vice President Harris can have her boots on the ground 24/7. She can be in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, these crucial swing states in particular, to try to shore up support. So Donald Trump, as far as I can see, is maxed out, right? So he just has to bank on Vice President Harris not being able to achieve her political potential, because that political potential is much greater than his. Now, I want to play another clip here of Jessica Tarlov. And this is her responding to what some MAGA Republicans have been calling, again, as a soft coup. This idea that, it's actually an anti-democratic thing what happened because President Biden was effectively forced out of power. Now, it's absurd. I'll let her get into it. But as a reminder, he is still the president of the United States. He has not resigned. He has not been forced out of office. He has just decided to withdraw his name from the nomination prior to the Democratic convention. But she makes a really good point that MAGA Republicans may not want to appeal to coups or make, accusations that others are committing coups given their track record.
I also want to say I've seen a lot of Republicans doing interviews about this. Like Josh Hawley showed up. Tom Cotton showed up on CNN and was talking to John Berman, and he tried to use the coup line. And John Berman said, come on, like if the standard bearer for your party tried to overturn a free and fair election, it's not going to work for you to go with that angle. This DEA.
That is absolutely correct. I don't know if Republicans want to invoke the terminology and the phraseology of coup. Now, obviously, they're doing it very cynically. They're hoping that they can somehow flip the line, that they can essentially blunt the Democrats' advantage with respect to notions of January 6th. January 6th still is an albatross around the neck of the Republican Party, and people do not look on it very fondly, and they do associate it with Donald Trump. But it's kind of like the impeachment efforts against President Biden, for example, right? They know that Donald Trump is more corrupt by far than Joe Biden, and that Americans see him as more corrupt than Joe Biden. They understand that that is a political disadvantage, and so what they want to do above all else is to reduce Biden's advantage. They know that they're never going to truly whitewash Donald Trump in the eyes of the American people. But if they can dirty Joe Biden's reputation, well, then the advantage may be neutralized. It's the same thing here. It's the same cynical calculus. They know that they are the party associated with coups and insurrections and the opposition to free and fair elections. But if they can successfully spin it that actually Joe Biden was himself the victim of a coup, not from Trump, even though, ironically, that is true. Donald Trump did effectively try to stage a coup against President-elect Biden by denying him the certification of his victory in the 2020 election. Again, irony is it's so thick. But if they can get people to think, what Democrats did here was as corrupt and terrible and authoritarian as what MAGA Republicans tried to do on January 6th, well, then there goes that advantage. I don't think it's going to work. And just to be very clear, it's not true. So the Democratic Party is number one, it's a private organization, right? It is a political party. The people in the Democratic primary voted effectively to tell delegates with the power to vote how to vote, okay? They're a step removed. And President Biden had the delegates. And President Biden said prior to his resignation, he told the American people, is like, listen, if you don't want to vote for me, if you've lost confidence in me, you can vote for somebody else. And then he eventually tendered his resignation. He had the right to do that. There was no law or ethical, prescription or any sort of prohibition against withdrawing from the race. Democratic politicians, Democratic delegates, Democratic donors, voters had every right, if they so chose, to try to convince the president to withdraw from the race. And it seemed to be successful. Well, for one reason or another, he finally made the decision to withdraw. They had every right to try to get him to withdraw, and he had every right to acquiesce to their request. There's nothing against it. It was not a coup. So I love the fact that Jessica Tarlov is there calling out this nonsense, spreading the good news associated with the Democratic ticket, the reinvigoration, the energy associated with it. And again, it's still going to be a very hard fight. We have 3.5 months, however, to make the case why people should vote for Vice President Harris and her eventual vice presidential running mate over the authoritarian cult of personality that is Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. Great stuff. Let me know what you think in the comments.